My name is Jerri Duncan Hansen, and I'm also known as the Soul Cleanser, and I'm an author. My journey started a very long time ago, but my journey started out came into the world as a surprise. My mother was much older. My father was definitely much older than her. At birth, I had sisters that were the age of 34 and 33. When I was born, my mother thought she had gone through the change of life, so she had no idea she was pregnant. She worked as a waitress, and she had emptied this 100-pound sack of potatoes and went into back labor and just thought she had hurt her back. So a few hours went by, and finally my father called the doctor, and he told her, well, I can't handle this here at home because you're getting ready to deliver a baby. Well, she told him he was a liar, and 30 minutes later I was born. I was born 2 months early. I died at birth, and they brought me back, which back in those days was a feat in itself. So I know that my journey has been, there's a purpose, as everyone has a purpose in this life. God doesn't put anyone here that he doesn't have a purpose for. So in my growing up years, my father was very ill. My mother worked 3 jobs. So at the age of 3, I became his caregiver. And I know people look at you and say, how could you be a caregiver at the age of 3? Well, I pretty much knew the signs of when my father wasn't feeling well, and I knew how to dial, a phone number to get to my mother if it was needed. So I pretty much sat side by side with him whenever she was at work, and was like a watchdog, watching him all the time and making sure that he was okay and didn't show any signs of being sick. As years went by, probably around the age of 6, I was then advanced my caregiving to where I was hooking up oxygen tanks and giving medication, and actually learned how to cook so that when my mother was at work, I could take care of anything that was needed within the household. I came from the generation of you were seen and not heard. So a lot of things that were happening in my life, I was growing up really fast. I couldn't relate to kids my own age because they just didn't get me, because I was around old people all my life. And the older people, I would sit and listen to their stories. And I was fascinated by their journeys. So I started, when at school age and learning how to write, I would write things down that bothered me because, like I said, you were seen and not heard. So I wasn't allowed to really express how I was feeling because I didn't really feel it was fair. All my friends were out playing and having a good time, but I was stuck at home with this old man who was sick. But I learned a lot from that old man. His journey was a rough one, but in listening to it, it made me understand why he was where he was in his journey. So as I got older, we lived in the Bay Area in Santa Cruz, and his health became worse and worse. So we ended up moving to the San Joaquin Valley, which I was devastated. I had to leave all my friends and go to I call it the hubs of hell because it's so hot there in the summertime. So we went there, and we were there maybe 3 months before my father passed away. But during that time, my mother still remained in Santa Cruz, so I had to find a school to attend, still take care of my father. We were living with friends, find a place to live. And so that started my journey to responsibility, I guess. And trying to find a place to live was interesting because during that time, people would just post a sign on the front yard and say, I have a rental. So I went down the street and saw this sign and knocked on the door and told him I was looking for a place to live. And the gentleman looked at me like, well, are you like running away from home, or what are you doing here? And I'm like, no, I need to find a place for my family. My mother's coming. And so I managed to do that. And he was like totally amazed. He's like, I've never seen a 11-year-old kid rent a place to live. And I mean, I was bartering the rent and everything else. I can't give you this, but I've got that sort of thing. And this man became very influential in my life. So when my father passed away, it was just me and my mother. And so then I really started doing a lot of writings because, everybody listened to how my mother felt, but nobody really validated me in what I had done in taking care of my father or allowed me to talk about my feelings about it. And I was daddy's girl, and, it was real difficult, but I was very thankful that my father had passed away. And I think people really look at you odd and say, well, why would you be happy about that? I watched this man go from 240 pounds down to 47 pounds. He would beg me when my mother wasn't home to put a pillow over his head or give him a bottle of rat poison in his coffee so that he wouldn't suffer anymore. And that's when I understood that, when you're growing up and you've got a pet and it gets sick, you take it to the vet and you put it down. But as human beings, we're not allowed to do anything like that. We think that that's a horrible thing to want to die and not be in pain anymore. And that made me become very compassionate towards people who are not well. I can understand when people want to take that final pill or whatever to relieve themselves of any pain. And it made me hard in some ways, but it made me realize that life is very short, and we go through a lot of things, and sometimes we don't talk about it because my family was big on not talking about the issues in our lives. And I think for me, it was important to talk about it because that's all I had. So I'm pretty much an open book. I've been known as the soul cleanser because of my whole life. People have come to me. I was like the Ann Landers of advice. People would come to me in high school. I got best shoulder to cry on in high school. They created that. You know how you have the most athletic? I was the best shoulder to cry on. So that's kind of carried with me my entire life. And so when my mother passed away, I was in my 30s, and I wrote her eulogy. And people were like, oh my God, you just like everything was right on point about that. Well, I knew her better than anybody. So people started asking me to write eulogies for them. And I said, well, just give me 2 or 3 things about this person, and I'll write it. They're like, well, you need more information. No, I don't. I'm one of these people that if I hear a conversation and I pick up on 1 or 2 or 3 words out of that conversation, I can write something about it. So I did eulogies for a while, and then I started sending out emails at work to maybe 5 or 6 people. Then it kind of advanced to 15, 20 people. Then it got into about 50 to 100, so I thought, I can't do this from work, I'm going to have to do it from home. But each and every day that I would send a motivational, uplifting kind of writing out, I would have people come to me and say, get out of my head, how did you know I was going through this? How do you know that I needed to hear this? And even to this day, I started it back up again at work, and I still have people say that to me. I went on Facebook with some of my writings, and my best friend kept telling me, you need to write a book. You really need to write a book. I'm like, nobody wants to hear this. So they kept on. Finally, people on Facebook were like, you really need to write a book. So in March of 2000, well, actually February of 2013, I had done a writing that I had posted on Facebook, and this lady immediately friended me and said, wow, I really needed that. How did you know I was going through that? I'm like, well, I just write what I feel, what's going on with me at the time, or what's in my surroundings, or just feelings that I have. So she had posted that she had published a book for someone. I'm like, well, you didn't tell me you were a publisher. She's like, well, I can publish your book. So this was like on February the 28th. No, February 25th. By March the 1st, my book was published. And my first book is called Fences. Originally, I wanted to put that not every home has a white picket fence. Because all of our journeys are different. All of us go through something. Some people talk about it, some people don't. Then I changed it to Fences. Every book that I publish has a dragonfly on it. People ask me about this dragonfly. Dragonfly represents my mother. When my mother passed away, my instinct was to run, just to get in my car and just take off. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't even want to have to imagine that this person was gone. Well, dragonflies appeared. Everywhere I turned, there was a dragonfly fluttering around my head. So even during the funeral, and I walked out of the chapel behind the casket, these dragonflies appeared. They all came like right to my face. So in my mind, in my heart, that represents my mother. Anytime I'm going through anything in life that's rough or a decision I think I need to make and I'm not really sure, the dragonfly appears. So that's why you will see a dragonfly on my books. At this point in my life, because of my journey and the books I have written, I've been involved in blog talk radio shows. I had a show called Is It Just Me? Because there's a lot of things that go on in life that we're kind of like, well, is it just me or is this just really off center, off to the left? You know, growing up in the generation that I grew up in, respect was a major, major thing in life. As I've gotten older, there is so much lack of respect. And I've been fortunate in my life that I've never been disrespected by anybody younger than me, older than me. I've been very fortunate. I've been one of these people that I'm like a chameleon. I can fit in anywhere. I can fit in with the very young. I can fit in with, the teenagers. I can fit in with the old. I can fit in with black. I can fit in with white. I can fit in with old and young. It doesn't matter. Anybody. I've never had an issue in my life with that. And I don't know if it's because people find the words that I have to say a lot of times very soothing to them. I relate to a lot of people. And I've always been able to have an answer for somebody when they've come to me burdened with something that's going on in their life. I'm not a mince word kind of person. If you ask me my opinion and you really don't want to hear it, maybe you don't want to ask. Because I'm going to be very honest about what my opinion is. If you ask me, I'm going to give it to you. I've been lucky that I haven't really been knocked down for it. People might look at you kind of funny, but then they'll come back later and say, that made sense. So in my book, Fences, it's just a compilation of things in my life that I've always kind of wondered, does that make sense? Or is it just me that this is happening? Is it just me that over the course of 61 years for me, things have changed so much? You think that as we've gotten older and each generation wants better for the next, it's almost like all our wants of what we wanted growing up is destroying the youth of today. They no longer sit and hold a conversation. It's this, because they're constantly texting. They don't hold a conversation with you, but they'll text you. You have parents that call your children down to dinner if you sit and have dinner together. They don't call them and say, hey, come downstairs for dinner. They text them. I'm hearing now that the kids are no longer have to learn how to write cursive writing. Well, how are they going to ever sign a document? Somewhere down the road, they're going to have to put a signature on something. You can't just send a text and say, oh, I agree. Yeah, you can. But what's happened? These are my aha moments, and these are what I write about. So I'm going to read a writing from my book, Fences. And this particular writing is called Rearview Mirror. Why is it that women who live in abusive relationships continue to buy into the need to have their man or woman's approval on every aspect of their life? Always walking on eggshells, always trying to be quiet like a little mouse in the house, as not to disturb him or her during game time or whatever reality show they may be watching. Always apologizing for everything that he or she has done wrong to you and making up excuses for all the time for them. Why is there a need for his or her approval? Reality is that everything this man or woman has done to you that has kept you browbeaten, low self-esteem, living in pits of depression, really is not ever about you. It's about them. Abused women and children tend to always seek approval from their abuser, always living in the shadows. Then one day that light finally comes on, the straw that broke the camel's back finally lands, and we as abused women or children finally decide we've had enough. We are no longer going to continue to drive looking in the rearview mirror, always looking back seeking approval. We have had approval all our life, for our entire lives, from the Almighty God. Once we realize that we are worthy, and once we discover that we have been the ones shouldering the load for many years, we finally bust loose from the chains that bind us and realize we no longer need that man or woman's approval to move forward in our life. Move forward and don't ever look back. Stop driving looking in that rearview mirror at what we had hoped things could be. Look out the windshield of your driver's seat and move on. You do not need any man or woman's approval to live your life. Stop looking behind you and look to the future. It took a long time for me to figure that one out because I was always looking for someone's approval, because I felt in my growing up I never had, I had the parents that didn't feel they needed to tell you how proud they were of you. You were supposed to know that automatically. But sometimes, even a dog wants to get petted every now and then for the things that they do and rewarded. So I think human beings also seek that. So that's why we're always looking for someone's approval in our life. But then one day the light does come on and you're like, I don't need anybody's approval because I already have God's approval. I'm still here and I'm still standing. So I must be doing something right. So after I finished writing Fences, I wrote my second book, which is Fences, The Journey Continues. And I wrote that probably within 8 weeks of my first book. I sat down at the computer one day, and in 16 hours I wrote this book. And it's still a continuation of my journey in the words and things that have happened in my life that I hope help someone else. Now my third book, which is called My Life on the Other Side of the Tracks. This started out as a conversation with a friend of mine from high school. I went through I lived in a very diversified neighborhood, so I was always around lots of different people of color, people that didn't speak English, Italians, Portuguese, you named it, I lived in that kind of neighborhood. So one of my friends, Shirley, who is also an author, she's like, well, what was it that attracted you to the south side of town, to the other side of the tracks? And for me, part of it was watching her mother and their all-women softball team. I was very involved in sports growing up, and softball was a big thing for me. So I used to go across the tracks and watch these women play softball. Well, also, all my friends that I went to high school with, they all lived on the other side of town. So that's where I hung out at. But Shirley had asked me, she says, well, you could go spend the night, or you could go have dinner, or you could do whatever at people's houses, all my friends' houses, but I never remember ever going to anyone white's house for dinner or spending the night. She says, why do you think you were accepted? Or what was it that really made you want to be over there? And I felt like I was home. I was raised by a Southern woman, and so a lot of people that I went to school with didn't understand what greens and black-eyed peas and neck bones and things like that were all about. They'd want to eat fried chicken with a fork and a knife, where, I was used to picking it up and chewing on the bone. They didn't get that. And so when I was on the south side of town, everybody knew what I was comfortable with. I felt at home, and it's been that way my entire life. I've probably, everywhere I've lived, I will always probably live in a very diversified neighborhood. I don't see color. I never have seen color. And I think that's why I have never had an issue with being disrespected. This book talks about that. It talks about my journey into adulthood, some of the things I did that may not be real proud of at this point in life, but it brought me to where I am today. So it's basically my journey. God has blessed me with placing some people in my life that I wasn't really sure what was going to be in my life at this point in time, or what their purpose was. And it's the chaplain of the hospital I work at. He came into a meeting we had, and we kind of hit it off. And every time I saw him, he was like, yeah, well, how's it going, this sort of thing. So I went to another meeting where he was at, and something kept telling me to ask him, could I follow him around? That there was this like this need that I had to follow him around through the hospital. I said, it doesn't matter. It can be some evening or whatever. If you get a call me up. He says, I've had people ask me that, and I usually step back and say, no, I'm not going to do that. He says, but there's something about you. That's another line that I've heard my whole life. There's something about you. Not sure what it is yet. I think I'm definitely have always been a caregiver. I've always been the one that, in my family, they tell me that I take them to the light. I've always been the one that's had to pull the plug, so to say. And so there's a thing about when people are ill or that people are downtrodden that I'm attracted to. I feel that there's a need for me to be able to speak with that person and try to help them. So because of that, I'm going to be going into a ministry with the chaplain of our hospital. That's coming up really soon. I'm going to probably be trying to do some motivational speaking tours. And that's pretty much what's going on with my life right now. But my journey's been a good one. It's had its ups and downs just like anybody else's has. But I think the one thing that people need to realize is everyone that's walking the face of this earth has a story to tell. And I think if you sit and listen to people, you'll be amazed at the things people have gone through. You may look at somebody, but you can't judge a book by its cover. You might think, I would have never thought you did that. I would have never imagined you were involved in something like that. You just don't know. Because people don't want to talk about stuff. And I think that's what's happened with things in our society. People stop talking. We don't sit down and have dinner with our kids and talk to them about their day-to-day. When there were bullies when I was a kid, you went up and kicked their butt and it was over and done with, and you ended up being pretty good friends after that. Nowadays, kids are killing themselves behind bullies. They don't have anybody to talk to. They don't feel that anybody listens to them, that no one even sees them. And if there's anything I can do with my writings or sitting down and talking with anybody that may help them, that's what my life purpose is to be able to help someone find their way. Because if someone hadn't helped me, I don't know where I'd be right now. But life is a journey, and as long as you're above ground, it's a good day, and there's still purpose for you to be here. So this is my journey. To end my journey here today, I want to go into a couple more readings that I have from Fences. This one is called Plan A. Growing up, all you ever heard the remark was, always have a plan B. You always have to have a plan B on the back burner. And don't put all your eggs in one basket. My take on this is, if we believe what we claim we believe in the Word of God, why would we ever need a plan B? If we have great work ethics going into something we believe in, why sabotage it with a plan B? We can make adjustments to Plan A along the way, tweaking things as we go along, but Plan A should really work for us if we work for it. Example, you send your son to college for an education. However, he also went to college on a football scholarship. Now, if he is offered $1 million contract to play football, are you going to say no? Hold up. Now you need an education for your backup. Yes, the plan was for an education for future success, but also playing ball was in there somewhere since they got there on a scholarship. So Plan A got tweaked for the $1 million contract. Placing all our eggs in one basket is good if you use God glue and not Gorilla Glue. All the eggs will remain in the basket as long as we believe that God will ensure the basket won't break. So stick with Plan A and don't set yourself up for failure in putting Plan B out there. Your Plan B is in the tweaking of Plan A. Or maybe it's just me. Our actions speak louder than words. Life is sculpted on a moment-to-moment basis. Every one of the thoughts we think, the words we speak, and the actions we take contribute to the complex quality and character of the universe's unfolding. It simply is not possible to be alive without making an impact on the world that surrounds us. Every action takes effect, the whole, as greatly as every action not taken. And when it comes to making the world a better place, what we choose not to can be just as important as what we choose to do. When we neglect to speak up, vote, or help somebody in immediate need, we are denying ourselves the opportunity to be an agent for positive change. Instead, we are enabling a particular course to continue unchallenged, picking up speed even as it goes along. By holding the belief that our actions don't make much of a difference, we may find that we often tend to forego opportunities for involvement. Alternatively, if we see ourselves as important participants in an ever-evolving world, we may feel more inspired to contribute our unique perspective and gifts to a situation. It is wise to be somewhat selective about how and where we are using our energy in order to keep ourselves from becoming scattered. Not every cause or action is appropriate for every person. When a situation catches your attention, however, and speaks to your heart, it is important that we honor our impulse and to help and take the action that feels right for us. It may be offering a kind word to a friend, giving resources to people in need, or just taking responsibility for our own behavior. By doing what we can, when we can, we add positive energy to our world. And sometimes it may be our one contribution that makes all the difference. Action speaks louder than words. That was written because there were some people in my life that, besides my parents, that were a big influence on my life. Their actions spoke much louder than words. They were pastor of a church that I went to, but they were a true pastor and pastor's wife that they walked the walk and talked the talk. There was nothing about them that you couldn't find anything on them that someone could say, oh, they can't do that because they're a pastor, or that's a pastor's wife. They truly lived the life that they believed, and they walked that walk. And they were very influential in my life because they always, as my father used to say, told me to remain true to who I am. So I think that's part of what's kept me on this journey, is I will always remain true to who I am. I can't be anybody else but Jerri. I can't be Susie down the road or Tommy over here in this corner. I can only be who I am. So as long as you remain true to who you are and you listen to those little whispers within your heart, that's God talking to you. And He'll lead you down the path because He already knows where you're going to go anyway. You just got to figure out which choice to make. So listen to it. And I promise you, your journey will be good. So as we come to an ending today, I would like to say once again that my name is Jerri Duncan Hansen, and I am the Soul Cleanser.